Writers, hello. This is Carter. Welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the conversation series where I just sit down with people I know, people I don't know, other writers, and we just pick each other's brains for about 45 minutes. It's very fun. Um, I do it once a week, and I'm always looking forward to it. But I will tell you, it's a lot of work. So I thank you for watching or listening to this because we we here at Unbound Writer, we pour our hearts and souls into this podcast. Speaking of Unbound Writer, a couple announcements. So we have redesigned our website. It looks great. I love it. Unbound Writer is a place where you can reach out to me for one-on-one writing coaching. And we also offer seminars, workshops, and retreats. Go to the website and you'll see under retreats that by the time this episode comes out, we should have some firm data on there, but a writing retreat in Paris, France, not Paris, Texas, Paris, France, spring 2027. I'm going to be teaching mystery thriller suspense writing alongside best-selling authors Alex Finlay and Clemence Michelon, with some surprise, amazing special guests. Man, it's going to be awesome. If the registration's not for it is not open yet, there is an interest form that you can sign up for, and make sure you sign up for that, and you'll be given all the information before anyone else, because we are going to be limiting this group to about 20 people or so. Also, if you go over to Unbound Writer, you will also see that we have a workshop on May 30th called The Visible Writer. Now, this is a class that I'm actually teaching at Thriller Fest a couple weeks before our May 30th seminar. And it's just how to be visible as an author. You can't be invisible. Very few authors can be invisible. What does that mean? What do you have to do? Does that mean you have to master social media? It's really just about how do you show up so people associate a real human person behind your writing. And in this world of AI, that's more and more important to make sure people get to know who you are as a writer and not just your work. And I'll teach you some ways that you can do that I've learned over time. All right, on to the show. So what a fun one, man. I've had some great ones in a row here. Today I talked to Daniel G. Miller. So Dan and I met, and we kind of talked about it a little bit in the podcast at an event last fall that we were at together, because we're both with Poison Pen Press. This is the same event that my previous guest, Marley Bush, was at as well. And just like Marley, I got to know Dan. I'm like, Dan's a really interesting guy. I want to get to know him more. So I invited him on to the podcast. We had a great conversation about going in his career from self-published to traditionally published. And then, he had just a highly successful book come out, The Orphanage by the Lake, followed up with his most recent book, The Red Letter. And then we got into talking about his new book, which I'll let you listen to in the podcast, but it's coming out late summer, early fall of this year. And we had a prolonged conversation about writing violence and how to do it. What does that mean? And how it has to feel inevitable and earned. And how do you figure that out? I feel like we went heavy into craft on this one, which is my favorite kind of conversation to have. And he was a great partner to talk to about craft because, we just spend so much of our time in isolation writing that to have a conversation about craft and see it from somebody else's perspective, whether you do it the same way or not, to me, it's fascinating. So this was a tremendous episode. Might have even gone a little long. I'm not sure. But we were just gabbing away. You're going to love this one, friends. This is my conversation with Daniel G. Miller. But yeah, you've been good.
Yeah, really good. Very busy. I'm, cranking out the books just like
Yeah,
you. So
it doesn't get any easier, does it?
no, it does not.
Somehow it gets harder. Somehow I feel like it's funny. I spend so much time talking about writer psychology and self-doubt and imposter syndrome. And I feel like you go through this cycle where it gets better because you start to
Mhm.
see results. And then for me, it
Yep.
just gets worse. Like there's a tipping point where you're just like, it comes back all of a sudden. It's like, is this book total shit? Because I have no context for it at this point. And I feel like my fourth and fifth, sixth books, which probably were shit, I felt more confident about. And now I'm just like, I don't know. Like the last one sold pretty well,
Yeah.
and I want to sell like that again, but I don't know.
Well, for me, it's a little bit of a problem of, ignorance was bliss in the sense
Well, for
that,
sure. Yeah.
as I'm going along, I'm learning more about the craft of writing and sort of realizing all the things I'm doing poorly, which
Right.
which
Right.
makes it that much harder.
Yeah. And
Whereas
I
when you
think
don't know about your mistakes, it's sort
totally,
of easier.
which there is something to be said about staying in a bit of a place of ignorance, or at least limiting your writerly worldview to a few people that you trust. And that's kind of what I do because I remember even starting out writing. Of course, I literally had zero idea of what I was doing. I kind of fell into it in a weird way.
Yeah,
And so it was just like I was plucked up and they said, this is what you're doing now. And I'm like, I don't know how any of this works. And so that did make it easier. But of course, there was a lot to learn. But so I never took any classes. I never really read any books except for Stephen King's on writing and a couple kind of
yep,
almost anecdotal ones.
yep,
But if I start thinking about like, okay, here's the hero's journey, here's the three act structure. By 66% in, you should have this, and you should have the inciting incident by page like it would stop me in my tracks because I would get confused.
totally agree. And I've actually avoided all of that, partly just because of the exact same reason you said about it sort of stops you in your tracks. But I think the other thing that always has struck me about all those sort of generalizations is
Yeah.
almost anytime somebody gives you a generalization, there's about 17 other examples that break that rule,
100%. Yeah,
right?
totally. And it's,
And some of the greatest books of all time break those rules.
oh,
So,
right. Yeah. One of my favorite authors is Cormac McCarthy, and you read him, and I'm like, all right, I'm sitting here with a dictionary next to me because I don't understand
right,
half of what he's saying, but there's something
compelling.
musical about how he writes, and
Yep.
he breaks every rule. I know it's very frustrating, but and the irony of it is I coach writing now. And so, for example, I had this exchange with a student the other day, and she's asking me for specific examples of how to kind of trim maybe a little bit too much description or backstory or whatever.
Sure.
So I rewrote a paragraph for her, and I said, this is how I do it, but I don't want to usurp your voice. Like your voice
Yeah.
has to be your voice. It still has to be the way that feels right to you. But if I were writing it, if this helps you at all, this is how I would do it. Because there's a million ways, right, to write a book.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, and that's the other piece that, one of the biggest things that was, I would say maybe my biggest learning of all just starting out was, I don't know about you, but when I started writing, thought there was such a thing as an undisputably good book.
Yeah,
Like this is a good book and it can't be argued, right?
yeah, yeah,
And obviously, as I dove into it, what you realize is it's so reader dependent, right?
100%.
That,
Yeah.
you know, some people love Dan Brown, some people loathe Dan Brown,
Right.
right?
Right,
And
right. But it's undeniable that he has popular appeal, right? Based
correct,
on sales volume alone. And hell, I'll take popular appeal over
literary appeal.
literary
Yeah,
praise anytime.
exactly. But that was the lesson for me was when I wrote my first book, I didn't understand like you kind of have to understand who's reading it,
Right,
right? And because how if you understand who's reading it, that impacts how you frame things.
right, right,
And so if your audience is Dan Brown readers and you write a Cormac McCarthy book,
right,
that's not going to turn out well for you, you know?
right, right. And when you're just starting out, you're writing for potential agents. That's all you're writing for.
Right,
And that's
right.
really scary because you're talking to, yeah, I mean, if the agent even looks at your query letter and doesn't just go to an intern going through the slush pile.
Yeah.
They're seeing and they're not even seeing your pages yet. They're just seeing like the vibe of the book. And then you start expanding and you get published and now you're hearing from readers. And it's weird because you're like, oh, I went through all these struggles with getting an agent and getting a publisher, and now it's selling okay. Why was this so hard? But you realize like it's really hard to get published.
Absolutely. Well, for me, I mean, I started out self-publishing because I just
Yeah.
wrote my first book. I just wrote for me. I mean, literally,
So
what
how did
happened
that come
was,
about? What was the
yeah,
desire? Like, I want to write this book.
yeah. So I had always sort of had in the back of my head that I wanted to write a book, and I'd always had an idea in the back of my head of what that book would look like, and had never done it just because, job life gets in the way.
Right.
And then when COVID hit, that was my moment. I was like locked inside, and
Yeah.
thinking if I am ever going to write a
That's a
book, I
very
have to.
typical story too. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah. And so then I just wrote the book. It was called The Tree of Knowledge, and coincidentally, I'm actually sort of rewriting it. I'm writing a second edition right now.
Oh,
But
wow.
I wrote that just for me, just for fun, and then said, well, now I actually did it. I might as well try to publish this.
Yeah.
Um, and and went straight to self-publishing. Didn't even try
Yeah.
uh, because, like I said, I had no idea whether it was even worth doing,
Right.
and
Right.
kind of was a modest success, and so that gave me the confidence, for lack of a better word, of to that, oh, I can actually do this, and then the rest is history. But
But why wouldn't you? I find it fascinating. I had Cynthia Swanson on not too long ago, and she's a New York Times bestselling author who then decided, I'm just going to try self-publishing and see what that's like.
yeah,
She's like, it's really hard. It's like,
yeah,
I mean, it's fulfilling and it's obviously, can make you decent more money. Obviously,
yep,
you keep a lot more of the lion's share of it. Um, but
yep,
I find it fascinating. So in my case, because I was so ignorant and because I didn't know anything, I needed some kind of third party validation, right?
hmm
Because I
hmm
would always have in my mind, like, yeah, but you suck.
right, right,
And I still kind of have that, but like
yeah,
at least like I have an editor who
yeah.
bought my book.
Who tells? Yeah, it says you don't.
Right, right. That you only moderately suck.
Uh,
But you self-publish Tree of Knowledge, and
mm,
to your credit, it does modestly well, and to have
yeah.
anyone pay attention to it, even a traditionally published book, is very hard. Why would you not then be like, I can really monetize this by keep self-publishing?
Yeah, so I think there were really two things. The first was sort of a lifestyle piece in that if you self-publish, obviously it's great. You have the keys to the car, but you are also the marketer,
Yeah,
the
you have to
publicist.
hustle.
You're wearing five different hats, and
Yeah.
and for me it was like I just want to write books. Like I don't want to.
Right.
So that
Right.
was that was one thing, and then the second was more of a kind of a tactical concern that I think is relevant to any self-published author, which is you really don't have any distribution or retail access as a self-published author. I mean,
Right.
you sell on Amazon
You sell on
effectively,
Amazon. Yeah.
and but if you want to get into Target or Barnes and Noble or Walmart or whatever, that's just not happening.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of shutting off this still massive market, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
which I felt like was, unnecessarily handcuffing myself. But
So and I'm curious because I know it can go a couple different ways, but I'm curious about your experience because you and I are obviously with the same publisher, Poison Pen Press.
yep,
Um, I if students kind of ask me about self-publishing, because I don't have any experience self-publishing, I don't feel equipped to really tell them. The only thing I caution them is that if you self-publish, once it's out there, it's out there, right? And if you decide to keep self-publishing or try to go traditional route, you have history that people can look at there. And
yep,
so you really got to make sure your book is ready to be out there. Um, Now, going as you did to the traditional route after that, it sounds like it was helpful that you had a book that had decent sales figures attached to it. So a publisher could say, plus he's now a known entity.
Yes, and actually, I think your advice is very good advice because I think the one advantage I had is before I was a writer, I came from a business and sort of consumer marketing background.
Hmm.
So I was comfortable in that world of, creating a brand and, you know, designing a cover and, you
Right.
know, all that sort of thing, all the business aspect of self-publishing. And so that gave me sort of a leg up, I would say, on your traditional writer. And that's the one thing I would say is like if you are going, I totally agree with you. If you're going to self-publish, you have to make sure that, it lands, right?
Right. Well, and you've
And
paid to
then
get it edited professionally and
Yep. But that's again what I say is like if you're going to self-publish, you really have to be comfortable saying, I'm going to be a business person.
yeah.
I'm going to be part writer, but part
Right.
business person.
This is
Because
my
that's,
widget. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And most writers, of course, have no desire to do that,
Right. Right.
you
Right.
know?
But then in your case, I'm assuming your then desire to go and to traditionally publish then is like you're not just going to a publisher, you're now I got to find an agent, which is a
Mhm.
massive hurdle, right?
Yep, yep,
And again, helpful that you had good sales figures on your self-published book, but
yep.
was that a long process for you?
No, because and back to your point about you got to do well in the self-publishing, because I did well self-publishing, an agent actually reached out to me.
That's that's a rare story.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't say that's the model, right? But
No, no, no,
um,
but that's great. I mean, yeah, and I think also probably by self-publishing, not that it's the same thing as traditional publishing in terms of the business model, but it gives you as a business person a lot of knowledge around how books work, how books get out there, how they're reviewed, how they're sold. Um, Not that you have to be in the trenches on that these days,
right,
but
right.
it's good to have that because I come from a business background myself, so I'm constantly curious. And what's so funny for me is that, and I forget again who your editor is. Are you with Anna?
No, I'm with Mary
You're
Alden.
with Mary. Okay.
Yep.
Like it's such to me, it's so coming from a business background, going into publishing, it's so opaque. Like and I'm like, and I never talk to these. I mean, we talk, of course,
Yeah.
but it's not like a corporate world where you have updates every week. And I'm like, I have no
Right.
idea what these people think about me.
Right.
Like I don't know how they talk about my book internally. Like I don't
Yep.
know what their expectations are for me.
Yep.
There's just no feedback.
Yep.
And it's not necessarily bad, but it's just so weird because in the corporate world, in fact, maybe I told you the story. I asked Anna a few years ago for an employee review because I said I emailed. I'm like, if we were in the corporate structure, I would at least once a year
Oh,
hear
that's
your
hilarious.
hear your
Yeah.
thoughts on me because
Yeah.
otherwise it's like I'm she's acquiring my book and then the editorial process,
Yeah.
not like yeah we see you as a perennial mid-lister or whatever it is,
Yeah.
like do you see me in line for a promotion, like whatever it is. I'm
Right.
like,
But that's a great idea.
but and it's funny in the corporate world I would never want feedback. I'd be like, i'm
Right.
i'm fucking nailing this, I'm doing great.
Yeah.
But here I'm so insecure, I'm just like, can you just what do you think about me?
Yeah.
It was,
No, but I think that's a really good point. And I actually think that's sort of a nice thing about self-publishing, right? It is just you and the audience, right? Like how you are doing is entirely controlled by you.
yeah,
And so, and of course the readers give you very, candid feedback on how
sure
you're
they do,
doing.
especially on
And
Goodreads.
yeah, and there's also sort of, in my mind, no excuses. Whereas one of the things that's been interesting being with, Poison Pen is, if a book does well or doesn't do well, there's sort of that mystery behind it, right? Of
Right,
how much of this was me, how much of this was the publishing operation,
right.
and that's an odd spot to be in as an author, I think.
Totally. And yeah, and there's something horrible about that and something massively comforting about that. because I love one of the things I love about being a writer is that the best can always be yet to come. There's no like,
Yep.
I hit my peak when I was 40, now my body's degrading or my mental
Right.
faculty is degrading. You never know, and for me, it was Tell Me What You Did, my 10th book, 20 years in, that kind of became my breakout book. I couldn't
And
tell
did
you.
you see that coming?
No. Well, I knew before it was released that Barnes and Noble had picked it for a monthly pick,
Okay.
which I didn't know even know what that meant when Anna
Right.
first called me, and then it turned out to be a big deal. And so that definitely helped it. But I think it blew up beyond that. And what the one thing I know for sure for all books is nothing sells more than word of mouth.
Mhm.
It has to there, but that then becomes that intangible, like, well, what was it about this book?
Exactly.
I think with that book, I think the cover was exceptional.
Yep.
And I think
Yeah,
that
it's a
got
beautiful
people,
cover.
it still has to be a good book, right? But they pick it up. Uh,
Yep.
but I don't know because when I wrote that book, I wrote it from a very angry and frustrated place out of my experience with my previous book. And so I'm like, I'm just going to write this straightforward, in your face. I'm not going to try to be clever. It's just like, boom,
Yeah.
and it hit,
Yeah.
but then I wouldn't try to replicate that because I know that's a fool's errand as well. I see that time and time again. So you just don't. And I think, you think about the orphanage at the lake, same thing, right? Like what it's funny because I see people will send me pictures of my book at Target, which I never know when my book is going to be at Target. That's always a
Right.
surprise to me. And it's always right next to your book.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And I'm like, awesome, man.
Yeah.
Good for Poison Pen. Of course,
Right.
Frida's all over the place there too.
Yeah, of
She's
course.
also with Poison Pen. But did you know that book was going to just somehow hit?
I wouldn't say no, that's too strong. I had a good feeling about it.
Yeah,
And the two things that really resonated with me when I was writing it were, as stupid as it sounds, the title. The Orphanage by the Lake, to me, it's like, I, I don't know about you, but I feel like you say that phrase and you're like, okay, I got to know what's going
right,
on in that
right,
orphanage.
right, right,
Right?
right.
Right.
How many kids have drowned in that lake? That's what I want
Yeah,
to know
exactly.
immediately.
Right. Yeah. And then the other thing that was big for me, and I'd actually be curious, like what your thoughts are on this, but it was actually the first book I wrote where I felt like the character was like my friend.
Yeah,
I mean, the other books I'd written, the characters were there, right? But they felt more just, almost like a movie screen character,
right,
so a character in a movie or something.
right,
They're
right.
fleshed out, but they're not intimate. Whereas this was the first character where I was like, I know this person,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
totally. And it depends on for Orphanage, what was your point of view? Was it
is first person present.
right? So we have that in common. And I know you also write from a female perspective as well, first person
Yep.
present. The first time I did female first person present was my fifth book, which was my first book with Source Books. And that book fell out of me. And I've said it on this podcast time and time again. I think that's when I really found my voice in writing. And a lot of it has to do with I just found out that first person present is what I'm best at.
Yep.
And because I think I'm a pretty empathetic person and I can be in that. And to your point, that character's name was Alice. I'm like, I just I feel her.
Yes.
and
Yeah.
and I've written first person present where, the one I'm working on now, I love the book and it's from a male perspective. I don't feel as close. I don't see him
Yep.
the way that I could see her. Like her, I'm
Yep.
just like, I see how you look when you're just sitting there breathing.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Him, I'm like, yeah,
Exactly.
I've got a kind of an idea of him. But I think the problem is my voice seeps into my male characters. So I tend
Yeah.
not to write from that perspective so much. But it becomes hard with the expectation being like, oh, this guy only writes first person present female. Yeah. So it's
It
weird.
makes it up a little, right? Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think so. Do you mix it
Well,
up?
that's that. So, well, I was telling you, I'm rewriting the Tree of Knowledge. So I had to go back to that book. And when I say rewriting, I mean, this is like a very big rewrite.
Yeah, you're
And
gutting it.
that's written third person past.
Yeah. Yeah.
And man, I have such a hard time getting getting in close.
Right, because you're not close. Yeah, yeah,
Right,
and you
right,
you
yeah,
could even be a close third. You can be just a single point of view, third person. Because that's how I started writing, because I thought that's how books work. Because I was
right.
stupid, and yeah, you don't get those fragments. Most of my writing now is just fragments because that's how we
Yeah,
think.
that's right.
And there's something very propulsive about that, as opposed to having kind of longer flowing sentences that are observational rather than visceral and emotional.
Exactly. And I actually think, and now we're really getting to the weeds of writing, but that's what we're supposed to do on
Yeah,
this
totally.
podcast, right? Um, I think I have a very hard time. You know how when you're writing first person present, you can essentially slip in a thought,
Right,
right? So maybe the person's walking into the room. I mean, some stray thought that hits their head, you can put in there almost seamlessly, right? It's not
right,
disrupting the action. It's
right.
just
Even just a single paragraph, single sentence paragraph, just with a quick
yep,
observation.
yep. And in third person, you can do that obviously, but it's much more jarring,
Right,
right?
right.
Because
And usually you italicize it, comma, he thought, you know,
exactly, exactly. And I was talking to Jennifer Hillier about this. She
yeah,
writes in third person, and she said sometimes she actually writes it in first person and then switches it back.
the whole
You
thing,
know? Yeah. No, not the whole thing, but
like a scene.
if she's struggling with a scene, right? It's feeling too
Yeah.
distant. She'll write it in first and then switch it back, which I thought was a really interesting trick.
Yeah.
Um,
Because I've actually converted the book that I had frustration with. I had doubts that I could get close enough to this character because she was so different than who I am. So I wrote the entire thing third person past, and it did not resonate with my editor. And so I rewrote it first person present.
oh
And
wow.
that took me 4 months to
I was
do.
gonna
And I
say,
remember
yeah.
sitting there thinking with page one, I'm like, do I start with a blank page and just look, or do I overwrite? And I decided to overwrite, but I mean, and it's way more than subject verb, right? It's
Yeah.
the voice totally changes because now all of a sudden you have that structured sentence become this fragment,
Yep.
and this paranoia that can't be expressed well. I don't think third person past. So yeah, it was a great experience to go through. I don't ever want to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I actually I said this to somebody, I don't know if you'd agree with it, but I would argue that if it's feasible for your story, like if it's literally not impossible, first person present is just objectively better. I
I
know
think
that's like
for
a hot take, but
I I know that's what I gravitate to, but I would specifically say that for mystery, thriller, suspense.
yes,
Um,
yes, yes.
so especially maybe not mystery as much if it's a
Like a
procedural
cozy.
or a
Yeah,
cozy.
yeah.
I totally agree, but I think the overarching element of all of this is like you've got to try everything,
Yep.
and you have to write hundreds of thousands of words, and you got to see what just feels organic to you. Again, it took me 5 published books, 8 total books to find, oh, this I think is me.
Yep.
But I wouldn't have gotten there had I not tried different things. Like 5 points of view in a book, I'll never do that because that's just not who I am, and that's way too
Yeah.
much work.
Yeah.
I want to be inside one person's head who's freaking the fuck out for the entire book, and
Yeah.
trying to just get control of their life however they can. That's what's
Yep.
interesting to me, But I've tried other stuff, and it just didn't work as well.
Yep. Absolutely. You're right. That's
So
the key is trying.
I want to. So we met. It's funny. I had Marley on the podcast last week.
Oh,
Uh,
hilarious.
so yeah, I came back from that trip and I immediately just like, oh, I want to talk to you more,
Yeah.
to all of you. So we met, and whenever that was, last fall or something like that, in Georgia, for Darcy Coates' event, at the Books a Million, and it was a Poison Pen Press thing, and it was great, and it was
It was a
fantastic.
blast.
And it
Yeah.
was really fun. I love I love doing stuff like that. And clearly, the preponderance of the people coming out were there to see Darcy. But I think, and I don't want to speak for you, but
Yep.
it's just like, who cares? Like, this is great. We're
Exactly.
not in competition with one another. We're all supporting
No.
one another. And that was great. Um, and then I had the privilege to get an early peek at your upcoming book. And so this is very rarely do I, and I don't want to talk about your book a whole lot,
Yep.
because I know it's coming out. But maybe you could plug it a little bit. Certainly the name when it's coming, I think it's coming out August or September, something like that.
September. Yep. Buried
So
in the Woods Below.
Buried in the Woods Below.
Yep.
Man, you did not hold back. Like, I'm reading this book, and then there are scenes where I'm like, this guy just went for it.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
guy's just, and I met Dan. He's a very nice guy. He doesn't seem unhinged. And I'm one to talk, the one person
I
who
was
gets
gonna
questions
say.
about where does all your darkness come from? But there's some on-screen brutality that I don't know if having respect for it is the right way to say it, because I don't want to be insensitive. But from a writerly perspective, I'm like, this guy just like, this is what happened, and I'm going to make you watch it, because it's not because of for the gratuitous nature of it, but because it's important you understand how severe this is, because it has consequences later. But that's a really hard decision to make as a writer. An example being, like, I once killed a dog off screen, an unknown dog, and got
Yep.
a shitstorm for it. You're just like, no one's safe here.
Yeah.
So what?
Yes. Yeah.
And I love that, because, and I think I mentioned to you that there's a lot of King, especially Shining-esque elements to the story, and being such a fan, like, I gravitated towards that. But as you're writing, are you sitting there thinking, how much this has to happen? How much am I going to go into it?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I'm sort of terrified at what reaction I'm gonna get.
But it's gone
But
through your agent, it's gone through the publisher who bought the book.
yep.
And I
Multiple
don't want
beta
to I
readers
don't
and
want to
yeah.
freak out readers. It's not,
Yeah.
splatter punk or anything like that.
No, no.
It's just heavy, it's just real violence in a thriller.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So I mean, what it came down to for me, and this goes back to a piece of advice that I got. I don't even remember who told me, but it's the truth, is when I write, I start with the characters before the plot.
Yeah,
And
totally.
because because then my feeling is if you really understand your characters, the plot and their motivations, the plot almost like kind of unfolds naturally, right?
and
Because
and from first person presence, if your character's not nailed, the plot doesn't matter.
yes, exactly. Well said. And so, again, not to go too deep into the story, but the main character in this story is a woman who is is returning home, uh, and home is a place of trauma
Right.
for her. And the book is really about, you know, how do you deal with returning to trauma when it's everything you've tried to forget?
Right. And
And
not only for trying to forget, but haven't really addressed.
correct,
And that's
correct.
and that's how I write. And I think that's so powerful, because you have somebody who's a ticking time bomb because of something that happened in their past, and now they're facing it again, and they never got therapy. They never really went to great strides to work through that.
Exactly. And so for me, it was everything that happens in the book that, is violent, for lack of a better word, is her confronting those demons, right? Those demons confronting her, however you want to put it. And so to me, it was like, this has to happen because this is what she's up against or
Right.
what she's dealing with. Obviously, I'm trying not to give too much away here, but
Right.
like, you know, and so it's one of those things to me where it almost wasn't a choice, right?
Right.
This is what this character has to do in this situation, in the same way that in a in an action movie, right? Like, as you know, some of those action movies, they're just plowing people down, right?
Right, right,
But
right. There's no consequence.
yeah, yeah. And so that's why I decided to kind of go for it, as you put it, because to me it wasn't a choice, right? Like this, if she doesn't and the characters in it don't, then I'm not really being honest about what is going on, right?
Right,
Then I'm basically soft pedaling it, and that's what I
totally.
didn't want to do.
And that becomes an intuitive thing. Again, after having written a lot, you get that intuition of like, because I think violence, particularly violence, I think, and sex to a lesser extent, has to feel inevitable and has to feel earned.
Yes.
And it absolutely did in your story because there's not violence on every page by any means, but
No.
there's the threat of it pervasively, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, there's no getting away from this tsunami. We see it coming. We've got
Yep.
some time. But when it comes, you're like, yep. And that was every bit as brutal as it should have been because it's a fucking tsunami.
Yeah. 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 Well,
You
and
know?
I love what you said about it being earned, because that honestly, when I read other books, one of my pet peeves, whether it's related to sex or gore or violence, is when it's cheap, right?
Right,
When you feel like the author's literally just doing it to get a reaction out of the reader.
right.
That drives me crazy, because then I feel like I just feel like it's like you're trying to manipulate a puppet on the strings, and I don't like that.
Totally.
But
Yeah,
I
and
but I
I'm
have
like that
no
with sex
problem.
scenes because I
Yeah.
very I don't think I'm good at them. I don't
Yeah.
think I'm good at establishing how it's earned.
Yeah.
I think when I first started writing, I'd have a sex scene here or there. It felt very like, oh yeah, these two people who are in the middle of the shit just have to have a passionate moment. And now I'm like,
Yeah.
that's stupid. Like
Yeah.
the last thing you would want right now is intimacy with a stranger.
Right. Right. Right.
You're literally bleeding from the kneecap or whatever it is. Uh,
Yeah.
but the same thing with violence. It just has to feel, and then once you write that, then it has to be consequential. Like nobody gets shot in the kneecap and runs away.
That's
They're
right.
traumatized. They're potentially bleeding to death. What
Yep.
what are the stakes now and how have they changed?
Yep. Exactly. And that's what I was going for, was, the every act of violence is it's almost, this is a weird way of framing it. It's almost entirely logical given the circumstances of what is happening on this island, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, totally. Totally. There is something very satisfying when you feel that all come together. And I mean, there are times that I miss it where I give my draft to my agent, who's very much an editorial agent. And she's like, "Oh, but this thing has to happen, and you didn't happen." I'm like, "Oh, you're totally right. I didn't, and I couldn't
Yeah.
see that for myself." And that's where kind of those third party readers really are really helpful because the inevitable. It's easy to see the inevitable in a lot of stories, and then you have the temptation sometimes, like, well, I don't want to do the inevitable. I want to
Right.
surprise them by avoid, and sometimes that works too, because sometimes
Yep.
just giving in to what feels like should be maybe even tropey becomes too easy. So it's a
Yep.
constant juggling act.
Absolutely. Well, let me ask you this question. One thing that I had a ton of trouble with on this particular book, is my two most recent books before are sort of procedural private detective
Right,
novels. There's a crime, she's investigating,
right.
things are plodding along almost on their own.
Yeah,
Whereas this book, as you know, is more of a psychological thriller, right? It's
100%.
it's
Yeah,
inside her head.
right, right. She's her own investigative unit.
Yeah, yeah. And and I had a lot more trouble writing this because the action itself isn't propelling the plot. It's
Right,
it's the perception that's
right,
propelling the plot, right?
right,
And
right,
I found that so much harder because, like, in a police novel, there's a crime, they have to take certain steps to
right,
investigate the
right,
crime,
right. And
right?
those steps are interesting and they're accurate and you can document them.
Yeah, yes. Whereas when you're writing a psychological thriller, there isn't that playbook, for lack of a better word. I don't know if you have the same issues,
I
but
do totally. And I think that was one of the issues with my previous book before Tell Me What You Did, because you're in their head, right? The whole time you're in their head, you're only in their head. And the fear is they just sit around thinking. Um,
yes, yes,
and they're scared. And what the beauty of it is it makes them relatable instantly because it makes the reader say, what would I do in this situation? And that's what I love about writing is like, that's what I'm constantly
yeah,
doing. What would I
yeah.
do? And then add a lot more interesting elements than what I would actually do. But then, so what happens to me is, and because I don't outline, I'll get X number of pages in, and I'm like, she hasn't gone anywhere. She's got to go do something. Does she have a friend? Does she have someone to talk to? Can she go, inevitably my character is going to a coffee shop, but I'm like, it's very important to me to have physical movement. So for example, Tell Me What You Did. I got to a point where I realized like, it doesn't feel like they would just stay in the same house if they felt they were being watched. Why not rent an Airbnb and that'll make them physically move? And that
Hmm.
alone can be more interesting. But my editor will call out things where there's like, if a situation goes on too long, where there's, like you said, there's that threat, but then nothing happens, she'll have me condense that. And so then I always think of like, what if she got into a confrontation with anybody? It could be anybody. It could be somebody she perceives as a threat who's just not a threat at all, but that would show her kind of unhinged a little bit. And it would give me a chance for her to like maybe do something that's like a little crazy. That's interesting. So I'm always thinking
Yep.
about like movement in a way, so they're just not sitting all the
Yeah.
time.
Well, and like, and tell me what you did. You have to reveal sort of that pent up rage inside her,
I know. And then I feel
right?
like I get way too like tropey with it where I like, yeah, she goes for a 10-mile run. She goes to the gym and hits the heavy bag. And, and I'm like, do all of your people have to be in fucking shape all the time? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Can't they just kind of rage eat, you
right.
know?
Well, mine swing from being like surprisingly incredibly fit to being, borderline alcoholics by night. And I'm like, these people would be like, what do they look like? How is their body
Yeah.
functioning?
Why haven't they collapsed by now?
I know. I'm always like second guessing myself, but it's always the stuff that you second guess that never seems to get picked up on. And so then people will pick up on something like, oh, I didn't even think about that.
Absolutely. That's normally what happens is,
That's why you can't overthink this stuff. You just have to like, I'm a firm believer in just sit down, see what comes to your head. I mean, for me at least, and write it. And, so I just finished my draft of something yesterday.
oh,
And
congratulations.
and so now I'm like going through the edits and like it's exciting because I'm like, I know there's a lot of stuff that has to change, but I'm excited to see like how I can make it better, even though I know it's going to be a ton of work.
How often do you run up against time constraints? I mean,
Almost never.
okay.
Um, because a lot of my career has been selling one book at a time. So most of my career has been my agent doesn't know what I'm writing, my editor doesn't know what I'm writing. Not under a contract for another book. I'm just under option.
Yep.
Um, and then I'll just be like, here it is. And so it's just my self-imposed time constraints. And which is usually, hopefully get a draft done in 8 months and then spend a couple months editing it, give it to my agent kind of a thing. So when I do have deadlines, so this deadline I have is August and I just finished the first draft.
Oh, great.
I got plenty of time.
Yep.
But I also expect heavy edits from it. Like I always get like deservedly so. Like, hey, I need a subplot. Like, okay, I'll see you in a few months.
Yeah. Let me work on
I've
that.
had a couple books where they've been pretty light, like 2 or 3 weeks worth of edits with that first letter. And but that's for me, that's the exception. Do you running against time constraints?
Yeah. I mean, that's probably my own fault. I try to write 2 books a year,
That's a lot.
and that's yeah, it gets tight. And I think um, one of the things that I always run up against is, and this Tree of Knowledge book I'm telling you about is a perfect example. Is so this is more of a fast paced kind of whatever Da Vinci Code style thriller.
Yeah,
You're on the go all the time,
got it.
and what's difficult about that is trying to develop characters while holding the pace,
Right,
right? Because
right.
they're in a frantic chase, so you don't have time for long
No,
conversations of
but what a
depth.
great teaching opportunity because I see this all the time where people think, aspiring writers think it has to be this massive exposition to really get inside this character. It could be one sentence. They do one thing, and you're like, I get that person. At least for
Yes,
this chapter, the way that they look at somebody, the way that they doubt something, that's all it takes. And you're like, and it's amazing how little it takes, and how little we tend to give readers credit for their own imagination to absorb that character and make it into who they want them to be.
I love that point, and you're exactly right. But I think that's one of the hardest things to do.
Totally. And it's always you're always overwriting is the end result of that.
Yep.
Um and so there's a great so I was having this discussion with a student the other day on a particular paragraph. She's a beautiful writer, right? But she's writing a thriller. And this character is an expat living in South America, and they walk into a bar at noon and it's totally full, and she's thinking, oh, it's the 15th of the month, it's payday, and then 3 sentences more about how they all come out and blow all their paychecks on payday. And I'm like, these 3 sentences are killing this paragraph. All you say, it's payday, and the reader's like, I totally get it. I see it all. And it's more powerful, right? And it's
Yep.
more propulsive. But I totally see myself in that style of writing when I was starting out. It's like everything was like, oh, I'm so great with the language, and let me really paint the picture for you. It's like we all have the picture.
That's
You
right.
just have to have those key words that trigger us. Um,
Exactly.
but you're right. It takes a lot of time to and you don't it becomes instinctual more than anything, and that instinct is only developed with writing a ton of books.
Exactly.
there's no
Exactly.
there's no easy way around it.
Yep. It's what's the Thomas Jefferson's phrase about, it's one of the rarest skills to not write 2 words when one will do.
Totally. Oh, I'm such a big believer in just deleting. If my typical manuscript will first draft around 85 to 90,000 words. And then I try to get it into around 80 to 82 final, but I've probably cut 15,000 words and added the balance. But I'm looking at every sentence. I'm like, it just feels a little clunky, feels a little
Yeah.
bit too long. What if I just said this? What if I take the sentence and it's just one word? And and when
I
you're
think that's
doing
great
first
advice.
person present, that one word is all you need because they think, oh, bingo. And this they
Exactly.
get it.
Yes. So
So
when you finish a draft, or when you say you finish a draft, I know you don't outline. It, do you have to like go back and I guess since you're not outlining, when occasionally I got to imagine you take yourself down a path you don't want to go down, you realize you don't want to go down, you have to backpedal.
yeah,
When do you do that?
pretty rarely that does that happen,
Okay.
which is what scares me because I'm like, oh, not only am I wrong, but I'm keeping being wrong for the entirety of this book.
Yeah.
Yes, sometimes I do that, but what I typically do, or like what I did with this last book, is at 60,000 words, I went back and read it because I just had forgotten a lot of it. And just to make sure I'm grounded in everything. And then I always keep a working document of just notes of like, oh, the windows were blown out of this house. And then 3 weeks later, they still haven't been replaced. That doesn't make any sense. Make sure the windows get replaced, but I won't
Yeah.
write that scene yet. I'll just make a note. So I'm constantly making notes. And sometimes
Got
I
it.
go back and I realize like I don't need half these notes because of but yeah, it can be a shit show too. Do you outline? I forget.
Oh yeah, I'm like a fanatical outline.
Oh, yeah.
I
Okay. Now I've
outline
heard.
every chapter.
I have so much respect for that. I just don't know. Like our brains just work differently,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there's no
But
right or wrong to either of
whatever
it.
works. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But that's how you see it. So when you are you like, oh, it's a 10,000 word outline kind of a guy?
No, no, it's less like that and more like the way I write is each chapter is essentially a scene, like a movie scene.
Yeah,
And so I just write the scene, like this is what happens in this scene. This is what happens in this scene. This is what
yeah.
happens in this
So you're
scene.
seeing everything
Um,
very cinematically.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because I feel like I'm the same way, and it's but I don't know what's happening, and that's the beauty of it. Is I'm like you were just looking through this person's viewpoint as they walk through life, and then I'm like, go see what's around that corner. I don't know what's around. Maybe nothing's around that corner, but you should go see. Would you go see? I don't know if you would go see.
That's,
That's to
yeah,
me, that's the
that's,
thrill of writing is like that
yes,
act of discovery. Which you go
yes.
through that act of discovery with your outline.
Exactly. So that's the only difference between us. We're basically doing the same thing. I'm just doing it at the outline
Right.
stage.
You're doing it at a smarter level where you can identify mistakes faster. And
I'm
you're
not
like,
going to
oh,
say
well,
that,
I
but
just wrote 60,000 words that went nowhere.
right.
Well, Dan, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we're going to do our own little storytelling. So we're going to pick a
Yeah.
book at random. I normally have three books right here, but I don't. So give me a color of a book.
Purple.
Oh, Jesus Christ. All right.
Purplish.
Yes, I have purplish. How about this?
Perfect.
The Only One Who Knows by me, Lisa Matlin, which I blurbed. It's a great book. Um, so I'm going to pick a random sentence from a random page. I'm going to read that sentence. That'll be the first sentence in like a 2 minute long short story where we alternate back and forth. Sounds like you've heard the show. You know how this goes. It'll be a
Yes.
mess. And when it goes totally off the rails, I'll call it. So give me a number between 1 and 250.
50.
All right, I'm going to quickly scan page 50. It's the beginning of. I'm going to read the first sentence of this chapter, and you do whatever you want with it. So this is first person present tense, so it's our specialty. Found you, you bastard.
Oh, wow. What a great start.
It's a great start.
Uh, you never thought you'd see me again, did you?
The look of surprise faded from his face faster than I expected and turned into a steely resolve. His hand twitched, and I didn't know if he had anything behind his back.
I leaned to the right, and all I saw was the glint of light against steel.
It's funny to think about all the times that I had been in danger before, spanning decades of my life. Being part of violence was something I was most comfortable with, but there was always that moment, and that moment is happening right now when it hits you that there might not be any moments left after this one.
He looked at me and nodded as if he could read my mind. Through a laugh, he said, guess who's downstairs?
If he thought I was going to go downstairs and look, he was out of his mind. But I also knew he could take me. I also knew maybe I had gotten to a situation I couldn't get myself out of. Perhaps my only chance was that I could find a proper weapon in that basement.
And then I heard the babies cry.
Oh, we call it there. I love when a baby gets involved in the book.
That
That was great.
was fun.
It's funny. I was just watching something that, and now I'm not going to remember what it was, but it was a violent scene in a house, kind of drug deal gone wrong, kind of a thing.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, like they're leaving, the people who killed the other people are leaving the house, and all of a sudden, this like toddler walks into frame,
Oh,
and and I always have such respect for all the stakes that introduces, but it also kind of annoys me. I'm like, oh, can't they just get away with it? Like now,
right,
what do we just leave this toddler with presumably this toddler's dead parents
right,
to
right.
find, to create another Dexter in the world? Like, what
Yeah.
do we? So, yeah,
It's
like
like a
some
side story almost. Yeah.
totally. And or if you introduce an animal into a story, like you have to
Mhm.
have like they can't be a byproduct. They can't be a bit player. That there's like
Yes,
you things have to be taken care of and it has to affect the flow of the story. And it becomes really difficult to me, I think. It becomes real
I
challenging.
agree.
So,
But that comes back to what we were talking about earlier about sort of using things as like emotional triggers versus them being grounded and organic, right?
right. Yeah, you don't want to be emotionally manipulative about it. Like, oh, I'm going to have this just to pull in the heartstrings. So,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
well, Dan, great catching up with you, man. It was
This was
nice to talk.
fantastic.
Are you headed to Thriller Fest this year?
I will. I will be there.
I will see you there. I'll be there Tuesday through
Awesome.
Sunday. So,
Oh,
um,
fantastic. Well,
yeah, it'll be
we'll
great.
definitely meet up for sure.
All right, buddy. Thanks for doing this, and we'll talk
Thank
soon.
you.
See
Love
ya.
it. Take care.
Bye. All right, that is it. That is my conversation with Daniel G. Miller. That was great, and I loved our little storytelling at the end, and I just love how deeply into craft that our conversation went. I highly recommend that you check out his books, namely The Orphanage by the Lake and his most recent book, The Red Letter. His next book will be out later this fall, so you can check that out as well. I know we talked about some of his violent scenes in that book. I don't want to scare you away. It's a tremendous book. I was happy and honored to have gotten an early look at it and to be able to provide some words about it. So check that out. And you can always hop on over to my website, carterwilson.com, if you want to know more about my books or sign up for my newsletter or watch episodes of the show. And of course, you can head on over to Unbound Writer if you are interested in any kind of one-on-one coaching with me or any of the seminars, workshops, or retreats that we offer over there. All right, I'm wrapping up. That is it for this week. I'm done. This is my only episode this week. So now I can go do other things. Another episode will be out next week, of course. In the meantime, thank you as always for watching and listening. Take care.